New HTM Hackers Hangout. It's December 1st. I'm Matt Taylor from Numenta, and we were just all chatting about how our generation is going to be the last to die, and everyone else will be immortal. So that's a completely different subject. We don't need to talk about that on live YouTube. So I have a few things I want to talk about, and then we'll open it up for discussion with the community. We already have a few people connected. Let's talk about Theta oscillations, which came up sort of unexpectedly. Mark, so glad you're here. Because I asked Jeff to respond to something that was about location, and he responded to talk about Theta oscillations and the learning versus inference cycle. So, hey, Marcus, you want to talk about that?
Sure. It's very speculative. It's sort of like an idea we've tossed around a little bit in the past couple of weeks. But I can talk about what a theta oscillation is. If you put an electrode in various parts of the cortex and hippocampus, but usually when people talk about theta oscillations, they're talking about everything in the hippocampal formation. So the hippocampus, the entorhinal cortex, subiculum, and other areas. But you can find similar things throughout the cortex. If you put an electrode in and you detect the local field potential, which is roughly just like the, it's a good way of measuring roughly how many neurons in that area are firing at a given point in time, or it's like the average number of neurons that are firing at a given point. That's what the local field potential basically measures. So if you measure the local field potential, you'll find that it oscillates. It makes kind of a wave. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down in a sort of systematic way. It's not just random. And you can think of each of these oscillations, like when it goes up, down, and repeats. Each of those is like a computational epoch. It's like you might call it a time step. It is one full time step of like some cells spike earlier in it, some cells spike later. But you have this oscillation, and like a really cool thing is that a given cell can, it tends to, I mean, it depends on the cell type, but many types of cells tend to fire at a certain part of the oscillation. Like some of them will tend to fire earlier in it, some of them will tend to fire later in it, and some will fire in multiple times. I mean, the firing rates of cells, when a cell has a high firing rate, that just might mean that it's firing at multiple times in the theta oscillation. And so it really, let's see, the idea of cells firing at a specific time in the theta cycle is a good way of of understanding like how a cell means something different based on when it fires. Like if it fires earlier, it might mean one thing. If it fires later, it might mean another thing. And I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick, if you'll pardon me. I'm a little sick.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a question while you're taking a drink of water.
Sure.
I think that's fair. So does this basically add like more dimensionality to how much a single neuron can communicate? Or is this?
Yes, I would say like it adds more potential for a neuron to carry more information. Like how early it fires tells you, I mean, for example, with place cells, how early the cell fires in the theta phase, in the theta oscillation, tells you a little bit about, is that place in front of the animal, or is that place where the animal's standing right now? There's a little bit of that going on. So there's extra information. There's also possibly a functional use of it as well. Like, oh, if you're going to say something.
You know, it just seems interesting because it's linear, right? It's front to back. So
yeah.
Because time is linear, it makes sense that it's always something in front of you or in the future of you even, or behind you in the past of you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's that linear aspect of it. Now, what you brought up was something Jeff mentioned. Sorry about me. I'm gonna be okay. One thing, I think this was Jeff's idea, and it's a good one. The fact that there are these multiple kind of stages of the time step is thought-provoking. And one thing that has been studied, I wasn't the one I didn't review this paper myself, so I can't describe it in too much detail. But what has been found is that in the theta oscillation, maybe the later portion of it, I guess it's kind of arbitrary which part you call the beginning and which part you call the end. I'm going to do this. The end part, there's greater plasticity during that phase, or at least in response to that phase. And the later part of that oscillation, the later part of the time step, seems to drive more of the learning that occurs. And what this caused Jeff to think of was, so in the temporal memory, one thing that it's kind of mediocre at right now, like one thing it kind of is not very cool, is when it comes to learning multiple sequences. Sorry, I'm gonna get through this. When it comes to learning multiple sequences with shared subsequences, I'm gonna be, man, this is bad. Didn't expect this. Okay,
hey, we can go under another topic and come back if you
I'll try one more time.
Okay.
If you're learning multiple sequences with shared subsequences, it is pretty slow at learning because it's like, say you see ABC quite frequently in the middle of various sequences. So later you're learning like the 20th sequence you've ever learned, and you see an A, you burst because it's your first time you've seen it. But you've seen an A before, that predicts B. And then you see B and you're like, oh, I know this is ABC. And the problem there is that you think it's like you suddenly treat it as if you've seen this before. But what would be nice is if the temporal memory could sort of entertain both possibilities of considering maybe this is something I've seen before, or maybe it's something novel. And the idea of having separate learning and inference phases is that maybe the early part of the cycle would continue on with the predictions, while the later part of the cycle would consider the idea that this is novel, so that in a few time steps when you see something new, it hasn't lost all context and it can continue learning the sequence without having to like come back and repeat that sequence again and again because it assumed it was something familiar. I need a break now. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that was great. A wonderful performance.
Thank you.
Through like a true showman. The show must go on. I have some questions about that, honestly, but I'm not going to ask you because I want you to rest your voice. So let's have that conversation another time. So the second thing, so that's sort of our research update. So we got a research update in. The second thing I wanted to talk about was Python 3 and NewPick. So the community has wanted Python 3 and NewPick for a long time. Everybody's moving to Python 3. Python 2 is eventually going to be sunsetted, so it makes sense to move it. The problem is that in our current state as Numenta, we're totally supporting research entirely, 100%. Aside from me, I'm the community guy, so we're not going to take our research engineers. We're not going to take too much of their time to do anything, honestly, that is increasing or improving NewPick at this point. It's in maintenance mode. We're just going to leave it the way it is. So the community, if they make a PR it's going to take a lot of changes and testing to get something Python 3 compliant, I believe. And even if it is easy, we'll need to add a pipeline, and significant work needs to be done to do it. And I don't want the community to be held up. If the community is willing to do this work, I don't want any false expectations. So we're not going to have a lot of time to review the PRs and get things moving very quickly to get Python 3 in place. So I'm just saying there's an option to create a community fork that's now divergent from NewPick, but doesn't have the commit restrictions. So that's always an option. I want you guys just to know that. And if because we're not going to be moving very fast on NewPick stuff. We're moving fast right now in research. Perhaps in the future that will change, and we'll come back and try and put together more production APIs. But at this point, our focus is in research. So I will encourage and try and help if somebody wants to make a community fork to improve NewPick for the community. I'll do what I can to help there. So I just wanted to put that out there. Last thing, just because I think this is an interesting conversation, was AGI hype. So I don't know if you guys read on the forum, but there's something about, who brought this up? I can't remember. A newer forum member, but he's been very active recently. Concern over hype about AGI, which I can share the sentiment because of all the Terminator talk and everything, and concerns about over-regulation. It's, you know, but I still think a lot of that are in the future. I don't think there's much of a near-term threat. However, the misrepresentation, I think, is a problem. And so whenever we look at other places and we think that's misrepresenting the state of AGI or the state of AI, I think we should also look at ourselves and make sure we're not misrepresenting what the state of our progress too. So it's an opportunity to reflect. And the main thing is the science, you know, even if it's theoretical science, it's science. So show the proof. Let's get benchmarks in place and figure out how we can test things and compare them and see how we can do everything better and learn from each other. So whenever we get something that's hype, I think the best thing that we can do as scientists and discoverers and engineers is say, show me the proof and let's, you know, test the thing. And the general public is going to figure that out. You know, the proof's in the pudding, and if they can't return results, you can't blow smoke up someone's behind when it comes to providing massive technological change. Yeah. So that's just my take on it. And I wanted to open up discussion at that point, because if anybody wants to throw in their 2 cents, go for it.
I think I read the forum post you're referencing. I think it was about Sofia, right? I think the robot that's sort of considered a citizen in Saudi Arabia. It's sort of it's a little bit saddening to me because it's happening at this stage. Like I know it's going to happen eventually, right? You know, I think robots are going to become at the level of people, right? At least intelligently. But for it to happen now, I think it's sort of a misrepresentation of what artificial general intelligence could be considered a citizen. I think maybe, you know, at the point of Sofia, I feel like it's more of a cool party trick than a really, you know, an actual.
Well, let's call that what it is. It was a publicity stunt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it's, you know, a little bit weird for it to happen now, but interesting nonetheless.
I think AI, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think AI is the next computer chip. It's the next internet. It's the next combustion engine. Like, we're creating something amazing and wonderful that everyone will love once it's out. But indeed, there's something like, you can say the internet, there are lame things about the internet too that would go away if we got rid of the internet, but it's not worth getting rid of. Same thing with microchips, same thing with combustion engines. So I think once everyone sees how great the world is, once this project is done, there will be less whining.
Okay.
Let's hope so. I think all technology brings similar things to the table, good things and bad things, and the bad people are going to exploit the bad things no matter what. Hey, there's someone just popped up. Hi, James. We can see you. I don't know if you can talk, but you're just taking community comments if you want to add anything. I hear a baby in the background. Okay, well, let's wrap it up. Oh, I just released a video this morning. If you didn't see it, it's called "What is a Dendritic Spike?" I was hoping to like boil down, like this is like the core of HTM theory, is like the definition of an HTM neuron. So, and I honestly never found a way to communicate that very well. So like 2 minutes, you can learn the core of HTM theory if you watch that video. That's it. Anybody else? Last call.
Well, I have just one more thing to say. I'm working on my project about 6 hours a day. My goal is to have it something to show you guys at at Valentine's Day, because it's so much. It's going to take a long time, and that's probably too optimistic. But my goal is that I will have a Valentine's present for everyone here, and it will be my presentations on the amazing things I'm working on.
I don't know what to say. Thank you. Okay, last call. Anybody else?
I think I just wanted to possibly ask Marcus. I heard the theta oscillations you were talking about. I just got thinking. I think the way I think of learning in a neuron, it's more of, I guess, it's not necessarily like a more time step based thing, but it's actually like the back propagation of the action potential in the neuron sort of causes the learning, sort of right after the activity of the cell. Or I mean, I guess I was thinking of it, and it seemed to be like these contrasting views of, is it happening in the neuron or in a separate sort of portion of the time step, so to speak?
It's at the beginning of that you cut out, but so you asked about. Okay. I heard most, but I missed like some just the initial feedback.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically like considering the idea that theta oscillations sort of say that the learning happens at the end of the time step, right, or more towards the end, and then I guess contrasting that with the idea that in a neuron, there's this sort of back propagating action potential that goes into the dendrites and sort of maybe affects them in terms of growing. Would you say, I guess, one is learning at the small scale, maybe one's learning at the large scale, or what's the relation between those two ideas?
I don't know. Is my
okay.
answer.
That's right.
Yeah, and it was weird, like to me, hearing that that there's more learning associated with a certain part of the oscillation was like, it kind of challenged my idea of like I need to understand more about that, because it was someone else summarized that. And I can't do it very well. And as for whether that has something to do with the back action potential, I'm just totally ignorant right now. It's an interesting question. That's, you got me curious.
Okay. I think I also have one other little comment. We can talk about it later, maybe, if you want. But I think I recently looked at the presentation during the meetup a little while ago, and your presentation of how to solve the allocentric location signal. I think I know the gist of your solution, and actually I feel like we're actually getting at something similar between us, as in they're functionally identical. I'll probably go over it later if you want, the similarities between my theory and yours.
Okay. I wondered if that would be the case. I can't speak to whether it is, but
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. I think that's it. I think we shall adjourn. Thanks for joining HTM Hackers Hangout. This is the last one in 2017. I'll see you guys in the new year. Happy holidays.
See ya.